Welcome everybody. Oh, I can't. The pressure's on.
Aren't you? It's not as easy as it sounds.
It is. Welcome everybody to the Coin Bureau podcast. My name is Mooch, Mad Mike Mooch.
And my name is Guy.
And today we're going to be talking about...
Bitcoin. Again. This is going to be our fourth and, I should say, final episode on Bitcoin.
Maybe not ever, but for the foreseeable future.
Certainly for the time being. I think, we're going to take it up to the present day today. So we're going to wrap up some of the more recent developments in Bitcoin. Where are we recording from today?
We are at home in Old Blighty, number 10 Downing Street, for a little masquerade party.
I was surprised to get invited.
Yes, I wasn't.
No.
I'm gate crashing.
I mean, they do like a party.
I've had history here before. I don't think I'm welcome.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Theresa May wasn't a fan of old Mad Mike Mooch.
She chucked you out, did she?
She
asked you to leave.
Well, her people did.
Right.
And there weren't many words said. It was just more of a physical gesturing to leave.
Okay.
And by physical gesturing, I was picked up and
bodily,
removed. Yeah.
Bodily ejected from 10 Downing Street. Well, it's a new regime. You're back.
Yes.
Is it good to be back?
Yes. The Volivants are great.
Excellent. And obviously, Boris Johnson, since he's moved in, has had the place redone.
Yes.
What do you think? I mean, do you like his choice of ludicrously expensive wallpaper?
It's not to my taste, but then again, neither is Boris.
No. So as we saw last time, Silk Road was shut down and Ross Ulbricht was arrested in October 2013. Mt. Gox collapsed in early 2014. So it kind of happened vaguely around the same time. Not a great period as we saw for Bitcoin. But a few other notable events had taken place prior to all this, and a few worth mentioning. So in June 2012, we had the founding of Coinbase. Now,
yes.
I think it's probably fair to say that anyone listening who's ever heard of crypto probably has heard of Coinbase as well. It was an exchange. It's now one of the biggest exchanges out there, probably arguably the best known, and it aimed to make it safer and easier to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
As we can see, it's been around for 10 years now. Then, on the 12th of March 2013, the Bitcoin blockchain split in two for a few hours. This was the result of a network upgrade that went wrong. What happened was, it split in two and started mining kind of in parallel. And fortunately, the developers working on Bitcoin were able to fix it fairly quickly. And I think what this shows is that then, as now, really, Bitcoin was a work in progress. It's not by any means finished or complete. You know, there are still additions, there are still improvements, little tweaks being made to the Bitcoin network even today. Then, in April 2013, just a month after that little foobar, the Bitcoin price crossed $100 for the first time.
Hundo.
Yeah, another big moment. And it was also around this time that the Winklevoss twins discovered Bitcoin, and they got really into it and began buying up a lot of BTC. And they used the money from their Facebook payout to do it. So do you remember this story? Obviously, the movie, The Social Network.
The two rowers.
Yeah. Yeah, these were the two Harvard students who were amazing rowers. They went on to row at I think it was the 2012 Olympics, and they're the twins who are portrayed in that movie, The Social Network, who got sort of done over by Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah,
but they eventually won a fairly hefty payout from him. I think it was in the region of about $65 million. And very sensibly, they elected to take quite a lot of it in Facebook stock rather than cash. And as Facebook became more and more successful, this stock obviously shot up in value. And they invested a lot of that money into Bitcoin. So kind of indirectly, Mark Zuckerberg helped finance Bitcoin around this time. And around this time, Bitcoin was starting to be talked about by celebrities and politicians as well. And Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they both discussed it on TV. Bill Gates was quite impressed. I think he was, obviously as perhaps the king of the computer geeks. I think he could probably be reasonably expected to understand what it was about. Warren Buffett, I think, was a bit more sort of circumspect around this time. He wasn't quite so sure. But, these guys, these sort of titans, if you like, of business and finance are talking about Bitcoin on TV. It's come a long way since just being kicked around by the cypherpunks on the internet. And of course, because of all this attention, it's also being talked about in Washington as well. And as you can imagine, a lot of politicians, perhaps the majority of politicians who actually knew about it, were not big fans. So we had around that time, we had a lot of politicians coming out and making all sorts of anti-Bitcoin noises and generally being very negative and, I have to say, very ignorant about it as well. But they weren't...
Politicians?
Yeah, I know. It's surprising, isn't it?
Would there be an ulterior motive for that, potentially?
Quite possibly, yes. So remember that while all these events are taking place and while all these big names are kind of discovering it, actual Bitcoin adoption is kind of chugging along in the background. More people are buying it and more people are using it. We've got businesses beginning to accept it. It's slowly but surely taking off. At the time Mt. Gox collapses in early 2014, but the Bitcoin price is hovering at just over $800. So it's serious money now, I think. I mean, in hindsight, that doesn't seem so much.
No.
But yeah, at the time, it's gone from nothing to $800. It's extraordinary. With an article claiming to have unearthed none other than Satoshi Nakamoto.
Satoshi Nakamoto?
That's the guy. So the journalist who wrote the story identified Satoshi Nakamoto as being a guy living in California, and he had been born Satoshi Nakamoto.
How did they find him?
I know, it beggars belief, doesn't it? How on earth? So, yeah, everyone was sort of like, what? this anonymous figure who...
Did no one just go, all right, who could this Satoshi Nakamoto guy be? Google Satoshi Nakamoto.
Perhaps it's Satoshi Nakamoto.
Him. Start the presses! Well, I found 7.
let's go through each one. So yeah, it's slightly more complicated than that. So this Satoshi Nakamoto had been born Satoshi Nakamoto in Japan around sort of 1950 or so, and he'd moved to the US as a boy in 1959 and instead adopted the name Dorian Nakamoto. But I think he was sort of still kind of known as Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto. Anyhow, the surname's the same. Now, there were some similarities with how people perceived the real Satoshi to be. I mean, this Dorian guy, he'd been an engineer for most of his career. He had a physics degree, and he was kind of supposedly fairly like privacy-loving, sort of libertarian in his views. So there's a bit of overlap with how Satoshi was perceived to be.
The profile.
Yeah, to the untrained eye, perhaps you could be like, yeah, this makes sense. However, it quickly became clear that he wasn't the real Satoshi. Now, I don't want to go too much into this here because obviously, as I've said before, we're going to do a whole episode at some point on the hunt for Satoshi and all the possible candidates. But basically, it involved almost the world's press pitching up to this guy's house when the story broke. And this guy coming out and being very sort of bewildered to have basically been doxed by an internationally renowned news publication. And yeah, it was quite clear that this sort of really kind of tragicomic spectacle unfolded where he was sort of talking to the press and being driven around in search of lunch by journalists. And
was it similar to, I don't know if you've seen on the BBC, where they've got this dude and they start interviewing him thinking he's someone else, and he was actually just in to interview for a cleaner's job.
Oh, I remember this, yeah.
And he's just like...
yeah, that was...
What am I? He just like live on air and they're asking him about this stuff and he's just like... And he rolls with it. he rolls with it. It doesn't look natural, but like, and then it turns out he had basically just been mistaken for someone else who was in there for an interview for a cleaning role or some sort of admin role or something like that.
And what were they interviewing him about? Wasn't it like financial policy or something like that?
I can't remember for the life of me. But it was
something fairly
one of
high
those
level.
Classic sort of, oh my God.
But yeah, it wasn't. It clearly was.
I'm Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yes, I am Satoshi Nakamoto, just not that one.
Yeah.
Not the one that you're thinking.
With the real Satoshi Nakamoto, please stand.
Yeah, exactly. From the Bitcoin community about this. And actually, I think they started, there was a group on Reddit that started a group to raise, that you could donate Bitcoin to in order to sort of give to this Dorian Nakamoto guy, as a way of saying. So I think they raised about 100 Bitcoin for him. 100 BTC.
Dox me.
Yeah. Do you want me to put your address out?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of, it wasn't great for the guy, but he did.
Can you imagine he was the actual, and it was just all a triple bluff, and it's like, yeah, but more.
I think a lot of people speculated that. They were like, he's just playing dumb. He knows that he's been found, and he knows that the only way is to just sort of go the other way. I don't think so. I don't think so.
God.
But
the drama.
Yeah, it really was.
Who's playing Satoshi Nakamoto?
Oh, Lord. You really have a problem with his name.
I'm sorry. I'm not doing this on purpose. I'm genuinely stupid.
You've had some late nights with the baby, haven't you?
I have.
So who's playing Satoshi Nakamoto in our movie version of it?
Oh, it's got to be Keanu.
Keanu. Oh, yeah. You want to because it was going to be The Rock, I think.
No, was he not one of the other guys?
Or maybe he was Hal Finney.
Yeah.
Was Vin Diesel going to be Satoshi?
No. Vin was the other guy who... Hal Finney, and there was the other dude.
Gavin Andreesen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's probably a good moment to talk about the Bitcoin community in general, because they are now kind of central to the whole Bitcoin project, really. And obviously, in the early days, they were the earliest members of the Bitcoin community, were the driving force behind Bitcoin. They helped it get out into the wild. And it was only because these people believed in it and worked on improving it and promoting it that it survived. And obviously, this takes us back to the Hal Finneys and the Gavin Andreesens and the Marty Malmys, people like that. Also, Mike Hearn, who did a lot of development work on Bitcoin as well. But we then saw, I think, if you remember, when we started talking about the early days of Mt. Gox, we saw this new breed of Bitcoiner emerge, a kind of entrepreneurial type. So Jed McCaleb, obviously, who started Mt. Gox before he sold it. And then you have the likes of the Winklevoss twins, who we've talked about, and then Brian Armstrong and Fred Ursum, who were the guys who founded Coinbase. So these guys kind of more business focused, if you like. Still Bitcoin believers, but they've obviously, they can see that there's business potential in it. There's so many things, and you go, actually, yeah, that's a Matrix reference. Anyhow.
Unlike Face Off.
Yeah. That was a great movie.
It was great, but...
I'm going to take his face off. And I should point out at this stage, mentioning sort of other cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin maxis, how they're opposed to it. Although we are focusing on Bitcoin here, other cryptos are beginning to emerge around this time. So actually Litecoin, which was one of the perhaps the first altcoin, if you like, that was launched in late 2011. So that's been on the scene for a while by this point. And Ethereum, the first came into the public consciousness sort of early 2014, I think, at the weirdly enough, at a Bitcoin conference. Vitalik Buterin, who we'll talk about on another episode, he was deeply into Bitcoin, but he decided to go a different way. And I think Ethereum itself actually launched in 2015. I think it was. So there are kind of rivals, if you like. Like Bitcoin is no longer the one and only. Plenty of cryptos that I like. There are quite a few that I don't. But I believe in a sort of, if you like, a multi-crypto future. Yeah, and each crypto project is going to do a slightly different thing. We see this now with Bitcoin and Ethereum. People compare them and say, oh, they're rivals, but they're not. They do different things. And we'll dig into this a lot more when we come to talk about Ethereum in particular. But many Bitcoiners, for instance, called Ethereum a scam when it launched. They were openly hostile to it and a lot of other cryptos. And this is an attitude that persists to this day. These views have, in fact, become kind of more entrenched. And Bitcoin maxis, I mean, there are plenty who are, just like perfectly cool and just like, yeah, I just love Bitcoin and I don't care for all the others. Some of them, though, can get pretty aggressive about it and will go to the extent that all other cryptos are either scams or just outright shitcoins or whatever. So toxic maximalism, as we now call it, is a thing. And look, in many ways, Bitcoin is the original and best. It had the fairest launch of any crypto, for instance. Now, Satoshi put it out into the world for all to use. He didn't allocate a whole bunch of coins to himself. I mean, he did mine them personally because there was no one else doing it. But it's not like you see a lot of crypto projects launched these days and launched back in the ICO boom of sort of 2017. And, huge amounts of the coin or token are allocated to the founders and to the team and to early investors and all that sort of stuff. And this is something that Bitcoin maxis point out a lot, and they've got a point. Bitcoin, on the other hand, it was just put out. If you wanted to mine it, then you could. And, good luck to you. And it's also the most decentralized crypto of all. There's no single person or entity who has any control over the Bitcoin network. And there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of nodes spread out across the world. And most other cryptos, a few honorable exceptions, but most other cryptos do have some sort of point that can be attacked. Either a kind of company that's running it, or a non-profit that's responsible for its development, or just a founder. A well-known figure who can be leaned on, who can be hauled up in front of a select committee or something like that. So lots of cryptocurrencies make large claims about being truly decentralized, and the fact is that most of them aren't. And they could be working towards decentralization. And some of them have made great leaps in that direction and would be very hard to take down. But Bitcoin is the most decentralized crypto of all. And it's really important to understand that. Whatever side of the fence you fall on, whether you're a Bitcoin maxi, whether you're an ETH maxi, or not really fussed either way, there's really no getting around the fact that Bitcoin is the most decentralized. And, of course, as a result of that, it's the most secure. And again, I know I labor this point a lot, but Bitcoin itself has never been successfully hacked. And I think it's arguably impossible to destroy now. The level of intergovernmental, international cooperation that would have to happen to destroy the Bitcoin network is just so fanciful, so unprecedented. I can't see it even being possible. Even if there was a real desire amongst nations to do it, I think it would be Bitcoin is almost impossible to destroy. Let's have a bit of context first about the block size wars. So 2015 and 2016 were, as by Bitcoin standards, fairly uneventful. And obviously all the mayhem that we'd seen in preceding years, especially with Mt. Gox and Silk Road, fortunately, if you like, we didn't have sort of any kind of scandals like this in the following couple of years. That said, adoption itself continued. More merchants carried on accepting it. And these included like big name companies, Microsoft, Dell, Expedia. They all began accepting Bitcoin. So it wasn't like nothing was going on. And we also had this explosion in the number of Bitcoin ATMs. They were kind of springing up all over the place. So, yeah, it was ticking along, but we didn't have the sort of massive sort of events, Mt. Gox and Silk Road style events that we'd had before. Although it's worth noting, in October 2015, the EU ruled Bitcoin to actually be a currency in Europe, which meant that EU citizens didn't have to pay tax on trading it. This was quite a big moment because there was a lot of debate, especially among regulators. Well, is this a currency or is it an asset? Is it a security? Because if it's a currency, then it's a lot easier to exchange it, to trade it. You don't have these sort of taxes. Whereas if it's viewed as an asset, a security, like for instance a stock, Ripple, then there's all sorts of implications.
Is that what Ripple's going through?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The executives of Ripple, the company Ripple, which issues the XRP cryptocurrency coin, they are being accused by the SEC of selling unlicensed securities. And yeah, we're still waiting for that case to be resolved as we record this. But the outcome of that is going to be big for crypto one way or another. And if Ripple is found guilty of that, if XRP is deemed to be a security, then yeah, it's going to be it's going to be some tough times, I think, for crypto then. I mean, nothing that can't be survived, but there's going to be a lot of, there's going to be a lot to be sorted out. But as we moved into 2016 and then 2017, the price was really starting to rise, and interest in crypto as a whole was really starting to take off. But as I've mentioned before, there was trouble in Bitcoin land. And this trouble manifested itself as the block size wars. So there's a bit of context to the block size wars. Now let's kind of dig down into what we actually mean. So as you'll remember from our episodes on blockchain, which you enjoyed so much, Bitcoin transactions, very simply, are grouped together in blocks, and these blocks are then added to the Bitcoin blockchain, and the whole network chugs along, if you like. Now, Bitcoin is designed, again, you'll remember this, is designed so that a new block is produced on average every 10 minutes. And the Bitcoin protocol dictates this, as you can't just pile more computing power, more hash power onto the Bitcoin network and produce blocks faster. Because if this happens, the network adjusts the difficulty of the mining to keep that 10-minute average, or around about 10 minutes. So you can't kind of cheat it in any way. The Bitcoin blockchain produces a new block on average every 10 minutes, and there is nothing that anyone can do about that. Now, each block also has a size limit. It can only contain so much data, and the size limit on the Bitcoin blockchain is 1 megabyte. So this was something, I must admit that I'd missed this. I didn't know this until I started digging down into the block size wars for this podcast. Satoshi only implemented this 1 megabyte size limit in 2010, obviously the year after Bitcoin launched, and it had up to then been 32 megabytes.
Really?
I never knew this. Yeah, and he was actually concerned that large blocks, 32 megabyte blocks, would be hard to process. Would contain too much data, and
could you not go with an 8-bit?
Well, yes. This is we'll see what people thought of that shortly. But yeah, so he cut it down to 1 megabyte, and no one really knows why he chose 1 megabyte. And yeah, Satoshi himself has been a bit unclear on all of this, but he decided to do it. Obviously, it was his choice to do. So he cut the block size down to 1 megabyte. I'm sure, little knowing, or mind you, he's obviously so clever, perhaps he did, but I can't imagine he would be able to predict the
hoo-ha.
The hoo-ha, yes, thank you. That would come as a result of this a few years later. So, as a result of this 1 megabyte limit, the Bitcoin network can only process somewhere between 3 and 7 transactions per second. Now, this is not very much, especially if you compare it to the likes of Visa, which can process tens of thousands of transactions per second. Gavin Andreessen, do you remember him? We've talked about him before. And Mike Hearn, who is another guy who's done a lot of work on Bitcoin, they proposed increasing the block size to 20 megabytes. Now, this didn't go down well. Well, it went down well with a few, but as we've talked about before, the Bitcoin community is a broad church. So there are lots and lots of different views. So 20 megabytes did not go down well. So they later reduced it to 8 megabytes, which I think was your suggestion.
Yeah.
Now, you're probably asking yourself, what's wrong with just increasing the block size? Speed it up, speed the network up. That's great. Now, the main problem with this is that if you increase the block size, then the Bitcoin blockchain itself would get much larger. You'd be dealing with much larger amounts of data. And as a result of this, it would become much harder for smaller nodes to store a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay.
Now, remember, you've got miners on the Bitcoin network who are processing transactions, minting these blocks and getting paid for their troubles. But you also have these nodes, which are often just a very, very basic little computer. And all they do is store copies of the blockchain and validate transactions. So they just check that these transactions have gone through, that the balances of the people sending and receiving are up to date, all this sort of stuff. They're doing fairly basic low-level computing, but they still need to store this data. Now, if you suddenly increase the block size and ask them to store a much larger amount of data, fewer and fewer will actually have the capacity to do that. And what that means is that you reduce the decentralization of the network because smaller nodes start to drop off. And at the same time, more power gets handed to larger nodes and larger entities, and in particular miners. So it's bad for decentralization. And if decentralization decreases, then so does security. And we're back for part 3, the final part about Bitcoin for now. I promise. Are you sick of Bitcoin?
No, I love it. It's my favorite one. I'm a maximalist. And if you say any other cryptocurrency is anything else but shit, I will fight you.
So let's look at some of the milestones in Bitcoin's history between the end of the block size wars and the present day. So 2017, when the block size wars were coming to a head, was just a wild year for crypto. I think, we'll all remember this. A lot of people listening may have been kind of watching from the sidelines and seeing and hearing about all this happening. But others like us, I mean, we were involved, we were invested.
We were in the trenches
around that time. So this was the time that we saw what was known as the ICO boom, the initial coin offering boom. This was when loads of startup crypto projects realized that they had this amazing way of earning startup capital, of earning money. They basically held these coin sales. They issued a coin or a token, and then they sold it in the ICO. And some of them raked in absolutely obscene amounts of money, some of them in seconds. The Brave browser, which is a decentralized web browser, and its basic attention token, that raised millions of dollars within about half a minute. It was absolutely insane. It's a great project, actually. It's still going. Bitcoin, the price peaked just shy of $20,000 in December 2017. And this was the time that Bitcoin futures on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange were launched. And this, as we later found out, signaled the very top of the market. This was an opportunity for institutional investors to get involved. More, not just people like you and me, just people who kind of suddenly discovered crypto and we were just putting our, savings into it or whatever. But this is, the big guys, the real, the big barons of Wall Street. This was an opportunity for institutional traders to wade in. And as you say, we then ticked over into 2018, and things got a little painful, didn't they? Yeah. Basically, early January 2018, what we now refer to as crypto winter set in, and prices absolutely tanked, and it was tough.
And this happens now every winter?
No. Fortunately not.
Well, this January wasn't great.
No. So when this crypto winter sets in early January 2018, this is when kind of mainstream criticism of Bitcoin seems to kind of bubble up to the surface again. And you have people like Warren Buffett. He called it rat poison squared, which,
doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't really. It doesn't. But it certainly didn't make it any easier to hear. Warren Buffett is obviously the darling of investors everywhere. The name that always comes up when you talk about investing. So for someone like him to beat down on Bitcoin was not great, not what we wanted to hear. And then it got worse, unfortunately, because then the following month, February 2018, the Chinese government announced a ban on crypto exchanges. And this, I remember, again, was a real tough blow. Because as we've talked about, China, along with the US, was the big market for it. And the Chinese were pretty crypto crazy. They were really fond of it. They were really keen on it. So Bitcoin has survived indifference, scandals, disasters. It's survived attempts to ban it. It's survived divisions within its community. It's survived hard forks and price crashes and pandemics. It's survived Elon Musk. And it's surviving global uncertainty at the moment. It's riding this wave.
All at just 13.
All at just 13. Just imagine what it's going to be like.
The Sweet 16 party is going to be great.
Oh, yeah. So now, folks, in future episodes, we're going to move away from Bitcoin a bit, and we're going to journey deeper into the wider world of crypto, because there is so much more to crypto than just Bitcoin, despite what those Bitcoin maxis might say. So in the next episode, we're going to be a bit more relaxed, and we're going to explain some of the jargon, some of the popular terms that you'll encounter as you journey deeper into the cryptoverse. Lift the lid on all those complicated things that
hodling,
biddling, diamond hands, all these sorts of
laser eyes.
Laser eyes, yeah. What do laser eyes mean? You'll find out here. I hope you can join it for us, folks. I hope this journey through Bitcoin has been useful. Stick with us. Plenty more to come.
Good.
As I like to say, we're just at the start of this journey. We're only 13 years in. And 13 is not a long time in the grand scheme of things. So if you're listening and thinking, am I too late to crypto? Have I missed this boat? Not at all. There's plenty of room. Jump on board. Good. That's quite a good It's quite a good sign-off, isn't it?
Good, yeah. I think that was great.
The music comes in, everyone's happy.